Hi, I'm Tish and this is Auto Social UK, and this is a great big marketing ploy by Ford. I mean, the first all-electric Mustang, the Mach-E. Now the reason that I say that I think it's a marketing ploy, because it is just that. Ford have put that pony badge on their first all-electric car because they wanted to grab people's attention. This isn't a Mustang, this is an SUV. But people wanted that argument to be going on so that everybody was talking about it. And really, I think I've done a really good job. In today's video, I've only got a couple of hours with the Mach-E, so these are going to be my real first impressions. If that sounds good, then make sure you keep watching. And if you're just finding my video now, please don't forget to go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Okay, let's get into it. So first of all, let's talk about this size, because this is quite a big car and it's not really like any Mustang we've seen before. Mustangs are known for their sharp edges and their kind of harsh exteriors, whereas this is a much more softer SUV. I mean, to be honest, it looks great. It does, people keep saying this, but it does look a lot better in person than it does in the pictures. However, it's still an SUV and I just don't know if I'm convinced. I've just still got that Mustang that I drove in my head back at Mantis years ago, and I just love that car so much. And this is just such a more subtle, spongy car. There are a couple of nice design elements. Let's start by talking about this roof design. So it's less obvious on this black car, but in the different coloured cars, you kind of have a coloured body and then you actually have this black roof up here. And what that does is it gives the car a much more of a coupe line, and it really does look great. It's quite a large car, but what that part at the bottom does is it makes it look slightly smaller. Looking at the Mach-E now, I'm actually perfectly happy with the fact it's an SUV. Sure, it would benefit from a larger set of wheels, but it does have presence on the road. Seeing this version in person just makes me all the more excited for the GT. The lights are a real highlight for me on this car. Front and rear, I both really like those, and they do have a much more aggressive feel that you would feel from a Mustang. This front grille, however, is just electric, let's face it. It's quite in your face. You've got this blanked out grille with the unavoidable pony on the front, and then you've got this slightly lower down part of the grille where what happens with this is it will open up to cool the car down when it's necessary. So it's all flush when you're parked up like this, and then out on the road that will open and close. The back is an angle of the Mach-E that I really actually quite like. I feel like it's much more aggressive than the front of the car. These rear tail lights are super nice, and I really do like how it comes down with that sloping coupe roofline. The Mach-E's main boot at the rear is 402 litres. That's big enough to fit 7 small suitcases. There's also a frunk, or a front boot, with an additional 81 litres of space. It's the perfect place to shove the charging cables and still has enough space left over for a few shopping bags. Or, as it's designed to be hosed out and features a drain plug, the perfect place to store some cold beers. I mean, muddy wellies. Something that I really like, which apparently is a little bit common but I've never come across, is if you've got the car on and you shut the door, it honks at you to let you know it's still on. I love that. No cars that I've driven have done that recently, and I find that super handy. The interior is very Ford, with lots of high quality soft leather. Vegan leather, of course. It's absolutely dominated by a 15.5-inch screen. Unlike some cars like the Tesla, there's also an instrument cluster, which lots of people like, but I think it looks identical to that in the Citroën Cactus. Either way, it's a big benefit to not have to look over to see your speed. The touchscreen is extremely responsive, however finding some things does feel a little long-winded. Nothing you wouldn't get the hang of in a couple of days. There's also quite a snazzy 3D volume button. As the size suggests, there's plenty of space, and the seats are high quality and comfortable. The red stitching adds a racy feel, but it's not quite enough to warrant the name. Similar to the MX-30, they've gone for a floating console. However, it does feel a little bit cheap in comparison, in my opinion. When it comes to ordering your Mustang Mach-E, you can choose from 2 battery capacities, badged as a standard range and an extended range. There are 3 power outputs and also the choice of 2-wheel or 4-wheel drive. The The car that I'm driving today is the standard range all-wheel drive model. So it has a range of 248 miles, 269 brake horsepower or PS, 580 newton meters of torque, and a 0 to 62 time of 5.6 seconds. The Mach-E has 3 different driving modes, so you've got an active, a whisper, and then an untamed. So your active is what the car will start up in, and that's essentially your normal mode. You've then got a whisper, which is your kind of softer suspension, calms everything down a bit, you won't have quite as much sort of harsh acceleration. And then you have the final one, which is untamed. Now, I don't really like the name Untamed, just because I think it kind of builds so much promise. I think it would have been nice to leave the Untamed name for when the GT come out, because that kind of warrants that type of name. But to call a car with an kind of over 5.5 second 0 to 60 feels a bit pretentious to call it Untamed. I think it would have been better just to have been a sport. So even driving the car in whisper mode, it still feels relatively stiff. It's certainly not as comfortable as something like some of the other cars I've been driving recently, like the DS3 or perhaps the Mach-E. This definitely feels a lot stiffer than that, but that was definitely intentional. I think there's a lot of really soft SUVs, and the Mach-E was designed to be a slightly sportier version. But again, I just don't know if the looks of it warrant that decision. Why not go all out? If you decided that you're going to give it like a spongy, fluffy exterior, then why not make some driving like that as well? Like, even in whisper, it still feels reasonably bumpy. Compared to other brands that only have one electric engine option, it does get a little bit complicated with the Mach-E. So the one that we're driving has 248 miles. The extended version of the four-wheel drive has 335 miles, and then the rear-wheel drive will do 273 and 379 depending on the battery size. And that to me is a really varying amount of numbers, but even the smallest offering is more than most mid-price electric SUVs. Looking at figures, the rear-wheel drive smaller battery looks like the best option for most people. So some good news, and definitely good news for me personally, is the one-pedal regenerative braking on the Mach-E is really good. So it will bring you to a complete stop, which is something that I really enjoy. It's certainly not going to be for everyone, and I have read online that you can turn it down if you want to turn it down, but personally I really like to be able to bring you to a complete stop just by the one pedal, and the really good news is this will do it. What is really nice about a change from a lot of the electric SUVs that I've driven recently is that the steering feels really well weighted. I think that's definitely something that comes with all Fords. They definitely have that feel of connection with the steering wheel. We did actually have a go at launching the car, and the first 0 to 30 did really feel rapid and controlled. It put a massive grin on our faces, just as you'd hope. But because it hasn't got the strongest 0 to 62 time, that last 30 miles per hour to 60 did then start to tail off, and it felt a little bit longer than you'd hoped. Yeah, it feels good. It feels good. For a car like this, again, for an electric SUV, that feels good. I mean, I wouldn't have got anything like that out of the Mach-E or the DS3 E-Tense, so that's amazing. It's just that name, just you want a little bit more. Let's have a go at using the voice command. Get me directions to Ipswich.
Please try again.
Oh, good, great. Directions to Ipswich.
No results found.
What? That's awful.
Navigation to Ipswich.
To go somewhere, say drive me to, followed by where you
Didn't
want
you
to
say
go
that?
to. You can say the name of a POI, an address, or a junction
Right.
to find.
Drive to Ipswich.
Which item would you like?
Woolwich! Woolwich! Do you want me to try?
Yeah.
Drive to Ipswich.
Say one of the options.
Oh, shut up.
Or make your select.
No, I'm trying again.
The USB device is currently not connected.
What?
Wait, one more go.
Drive to Ipswich.
No results found.
Oh my goodness.
Take me to John Grose, Ipswich.
Starting route to John Grose.
Hurrah! The more I think about my thoughts on the electric Mustang, the more I realise that I'm not annoyed it's an all-electric car. I'm not even annoyed it's an SUV. What I'm annoyed is that Ford felt that they needed to dilute the Mustang name for such a tepid offering. I really wish they just reserved the Mustang name for when they brought out the GT, and this should have just been an all-electric Ford, because I think people would have flooded to buy it anyway because they love Fords. I'm just a little bit disappointed that this is the first electric Mustang. Please, let's race me. Race me in my Mustang.
Let's go in untamed. Take on the untamed beast.
Okay, yeah, the SVR wins.
Oh, he's gonna stop behind a polo.
Oh, that sounds so good, doesn't it? So those were my first thoughts on the Mach-E. What do you think? Do you agree with them? I'm still not convinced. I like it a lot more than I did before I drove it, but I still just need to drop that dream of the Mustang that I had when I drove it back at Mantis. But as an all-electric SUV, there's no denying this is a great car, and it's so much more engaging than some of the other SUVs that I've driven recently. If you are interested in a new Mach-E or any Fords, then please make sure you click the link in the description box, and John Grose will be happy to help you out. There's some really great guys over there, and they'll make sure they look after you. If you've enjoyed this video, please go ahead and give it a massive thumbs up. And if you want to see more like this, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Until next time, bye.